oppressed group in history has achieved deliverance without having taken the lead role. Source unknown. No oppressed group in history has achieved deliverance without having taken the lead role. It is my hope. It is my hope that the reader has heard within the text of Black Labor, White Wealth a simple call to action for Black America. I hope that it has helped to clarify the past for the purpose of illuminating a path towards a more desirable future. Although the socio-economic problems within Black America are devastating and all indicators show that conditions will worsen, they are not insurmountable. Black America has the cultural and economic wherewithal to become a competitive racial group. But successful competition on a global scale will require a new kind of leadership, changes in social behavior patterns, the practice of group economics and politics, and a strong sense of community. Blacks should capitalize on their strengths, on their potential strengths, beginning with those areas where they are dominant or can control basic resources, such as in the areas of music, entertainment, government, municipalities, urban lands and buildings. The approximately $300 billion of annual disposable black income and the 35 million strong black consumer market. The hope of black empowerment begins at home in black communities, not in jobs within the 500 major corporations or in white suburbs. To the credit of Black America, some positive signs have appeared that strongly suggest that blacks are aware of the importance of the task before them. While not yet a concerted effort, some black efforts are beginning to signal proactive choices and an unwillingness to depend upon the support of others to resolve problems. In a rapidly approaching pluralistic society, if there can be coalition building, fine. In a rapidly approaching pluralistic society, if there can be coalition building, fine. But coalition building with other racial groups cannot be used to seek self-sufficiency and self-empowerment within Black America. But coalition building with other racial groups cannot be used to seek self-sufficiency and self-empowerment within Black America. In the final analysis, blacks and blacks alone will have to solve black people's wealth and power problems. The socio-economic and political strategies offered in this book clearly should be tried because they are based upon lessons from the past and are designed to reverse the impact of both racism and the crabs in a barrel syndrome, which has crippled blacks from within for centuries. Black efforts to develop vertical business enterprises are few, but encouraging. Black entrepreneurs have successfully started or acquired businesses with significant potential for generating other black businesses in entertainment and beverage industries. Whether their ultimate impact results in personal gain only or has a community impact by creating more black business and job opportunities remains to be seen. In entertainment, black producers create black oriented movies and cable shows that feature black comedians and employ black talent. In professional sports, a retired football player is pursuing an expansion ownership opportunity that would place a national football team in a major black city. If he is successful, he would be the first African American to acquire ownership in professional football. Professional boxing has at least one major boxing promoter who syndicates fights on television, home box office, on television home box office. In politics, there's also a promising movement. During the September 1993 Congressional Black Caucus annual forum, a Black Leadership Alliance was established between the caucus, the NAACP, and the Nation of Islam. The alliance was an attempt to put aside personal and religious differences and to work together to establish a black united front. However, there is serious doubt that a functional alliance will materialize. Another significant conference that Black America occurred Another significant conference for Black America occurred during the month of June 1993 when 5,000 participants and observers met in Gabon, Africa, for the second African American Summit. The summit's goal was to forge a common strategy between Black Americans and Africans that would promote economic development and progress in education and healthcare for sub-Saharan Africa. According to the Washington Post, the first summit, held in the Ivory Coast in 1991, helped secure agreements that eliminated more than $1 billion of Africa's debt and resulted in multi-million-dollar black U.S. business investments in African development projects. These are but a few small steps in a long journey, but there are very important steps towards black socio-economic maturity and a new sense of community. Whether blacks can beat the clock is another question. Individual efforts, while important, must be maximized and become part of a plan for cohesive group development and outgrowth of the research and networking stimulated via the writing of this book was the establishment of the Harvest Institute, a Washington-based national black think tank. The chief goal of the Harvest Institute is to construct a black intellectual infrastructure to formulate a black national policy and empowerment plan with comprehensive strategies for getting Black America from where it is today to where it needs to be. The Harvest Institute's short-term goals are to achieve competitive group economics and political empowerment for Black America as quickly as possible. Appendix: Boundary Safeguards. Slavery safeguards and restrictions in southern states. Year states legal and social restrictions. Purpose of restriction. Alright, 1619. Maryland segregation policy. Recommend that blacks be socially excluded. 1619. Maryland segregation policy. 1642. Virginia's fugitive slave law. Authorized branding of an R in the face. Authorized branding of an R in the face of runaway slaves. 1686, Carolina trade law barred blacks from all trades. 1691, Virginia marriage law prescribed banishment for any white woman marrying a black. 1705, Virginia public office law prohibited blacks from holding or assuming any public office. 1710, Virginia enacted meritorious manumission, rewarded slaves with freedom for informing on other slaves. 1712, South Carolina Fugitive Slave Act criminalized runaway slaves to protect owners' investments. 1715, North Carolina anti-interracial marriage law forbade and criminalized black and white marriages. 1717, South Carolina anti-interracial marriage law forbade and criminalized black-white marriages. 1723, Virginia anti-assembly law impeded blacks from meeting or having a sense of community. Virginia anti-assembly law. In Virginia, an unlawful assembly is defined as three or more people assembled who share a common intent and to advance a lawful or unlawful purpose by committing acts of force or violence that could jeopardize public safety, peace, and order. The assembly actually inspires well-grounded fear of serious and immediate breaches of public safety, peace, and order. 1723. 1723 legislation abolished slave rights. Virginia's anti-assembly law impeded Negroes from meeting or having a sense of community. Virginia's weapons law forbade Negroes from keeping weapons. The Virginia colony enacted laws to limit the increase of free Negroes to those born into that class or manumitted by special acts of the legislation, denied free Negroes the right to vote and forbid Cameron English for blah blah blah. Go back. There were many enslaved people. There were many enslaved people who attained freedom before the American Civil War. Some were freed or voluntarily emancipated by their slaveholder through manumission. Regulation of manumission began in 1692 when Virginia established that to manumit a slave, a person must pay the cost for them to be transported out of the colony. A 1723 law stated that slaves may not be set free upon any pretense whatsoever, except for some meritorious services to be adjudged and allowed by the governor and council. The new government of Virginia repealed the laws in 1782 and declared freedom for slaves who had fought for the colonies. nice. Okay. Okay, yo. Weapons law, runaway law. Okay. Keeping weapons. All right. 1740, South Carolina Consolidated Acts, Consolidated Slave Act forbade slaves from raising or owning farm animals. 1775, Virginia runaway law allowed sale and execution of slaves attempted to flee. Continued. 1775, North Carolina manumission law forbade freeing slaves except for meritorious service. 1790, first naturalization law. Congress declares United States a white nation. 1792, federal militia law restricted enrollment in peacetime militia to whites only. 1793, fugitive slave law discouraged slaves from running away, protected planters invested capital. 1793, Virginia migration law forbade free blacks from entering the state. 1806, so they can't have them get no ideas. 1806, Louisiana migration law forbade immigration for free black males over 15 years old. 1809, congressional mail law excluded blacks from carrying U.S. mail. 1811, Kentucky's conspiracy law made conspiracy among slaves a capital offense. 1813, Virginia poll tax exacted a $1.50 tax on blacks who were forbidden to vote. 1814, Louisiana migration law prohibited free blacks from entering the state. 1815, Virginia poll tax required free blacks to pay a $2.50 tax so whites could vote. 1816, Louisiana jury law provided that no black slave could testify against a white person. 1819, Missouri literacy law forbade assembling and teaching blacks to read or write. 1820, South Carolina migration law prohibited free blacks from entering the state. 1826, North Carolina migration law forbade entry of free blacks. Violators penalized $500. 1827, Florida voting law restricted voting to whites. 1829, Virginia literacy law provided fine and imprisonment for teaching a black person to read. 1830, Louisiana expulsion law required all free blacks to leave state within 60 days. 1830, Mississippi employment law forbade blacks employment in printing and entertainment. 1830, Kentucky property tax law taxed blacks, forbade their voting or attending school. 1831, North Carolina license law required all black traders and peddlers to be licensed. 1831, South Carolina enacted licensing prohibition. Free blacks were denied any kind of a business license. 1831, Mississippi preaching law forbade blacks to preach except with permission. 1832, Alabama and Virginia literacy laws fined and flogged whites for teaching blacks to read or write. 1833, Georgia employment law prohibited blacks from working in reading or writing jobs. 1833, Georgia literacy law provided fines and whippings for teaching blacks. 1833, Kentucky licensing prohibition. No free person of color could obtain a business license. 1835, Missouri registration law required the registration and bonding of all free blacks. 1835, Georgia employment law prohibited employing blacks in drugstores. 1837, South Carolina curfew law required blacks to be off streets by a certain hour. 1838, Virginia School of Law forbade blacks who had gone north to school to return. Can't give them no ideas. 1838, North Carolina marriage law declared void all interracial marriages to third generation. 1841, South Carolina observing law forbade blacks and whites from looking out the same windows. 1842, Maryland information law for felonied blacks demanding or receiving abolition newspapers. Can't have them get no ideas. 1844, Maryland color tax placed a tax on all employed black artisans. 1844, South Carolina amusement law prohibited blacks from playing games with whites. 1845, Georgia contracting law prohibited contracts with black mechanics. 1846, Kentucky incitement law provided imprisonment for inciting slaves to rebel. 1847, Missouri literacy law prohibited teaching blacks to read or write. 1848, Virginia incitement law provided death penalty for advising slaves to rebel. 1850, fugitive slave law enacted, stronger enforcement provisions. 1852, Georgia tax law imposed annual $5 per capita tax on free blacks. 1853, Virginia poll tax law levied tax on all free black males 21 to 55 years old. 1856, Virginia drug law forbade selling poisonous drugs to blacks. 1857, Dred Scott decision. Supreme Court dehumanized and disenfranchised blacks. 1858, Maryland recreation law forbade free blacks and slaves from boating on the Potomac. 1868, Southern Black Codes deprived blacks of right to vote and hold public office. 1883, Civil Rights Law of 1875 weakened. Supreme Court challenged the constitutionality of the law. 1898, Grandfather Clause deprived blacks of the right to vote in Louisiana. 1660. Okay, continue. All right, 1660. Connecticut military law barred blacks from military service. 1664, Maryland marriage law, enactment of the first anti-racial marriage statutes. 1667, British Plantation Act established code of conduct for slaves and slaveholders. 1705, Massachusetts anti-miscegenation law criminalized interracial marriages. 1705, New York runaway law prescribed execution for recaptured runaway slaves. 1721, Delaware marriage law forbade marriage between white women and black men. 1722, Pennsylvania morality statement condemned blacks for sexual acts with whites. 1722, Pennsylvania anti-miscegenation law criminalized interracial marriages. 1784, Connecticut military law forbade blacks from serving in the militia. 1800, Maryland agricultural laws prohibited blacks from raising and selling agricultural products. 1804, Ohio Anti-Mobility Law enacted black laws that restricted blacks' movement. 1804, Ohio Registration Law required blacks to register and annually post a bond. 1805, Maryland Licensure Law forbade blacks from selling tobacco or corn without license. 1807, Maryland Residence Law limited residents of entering free blacks to 2 weeks. Can't stay up in here. Gotta keep them moving. 1810, Maryland Voting Law restricted voting rights to whites only. 1811, Delaware Migration Law forbade migration of blacks, levied $10 per week fine. 1818, Connecticut voting law disenfranchised black voters. 1821, District of Columbia registration law required blacks to register annually and post bond. 1827, Maryland Occupation Acts petition to legislator prohibited blacks from driving or owning hacks, carts, or drays. 1929, Illinois marriage law forbade black and white marriages. 1831, Indiana mobility law required blacks to register in order to work and post bond. 1836, District of Columbia business license law prohibited licensing blacks for profit making activities. 1844, Maryland, it's 1836, 1844, Maryland Occupation Acts excluded blacks from the carpentry trade. そう